Welcome to Canadian Innovators, the show that celebrates innovation, entrepreneurs, and the Canadian spirit. I'm Jocelyn, and every week we introduce a new entrepreneur or expert in the economy to tell their stories and unpack the challenges of keeping jobs in Canada, as well as share ideas for economic growth and prosperity. Today on the program, we're going to discuss the rise and importance of independent media. In a world where the mainstream media seems to talk with a unified viewpoint and is heavily funded by the Canadian federal government, the independent media has emerged to provide an unvarnished reflection of news and current events. Joining me to discuss and back for return engagement is internationally renowned journalist and author Anthony Furey. Anthony's book, Pulse Attack, garnered critical acclaim. Anthony has recently left Postmedia to join True North Media as their vice president. Welcome to the program, Anthony.
Hey, great to be here, Jocelyn.
Anthony, you've been a shining star at Postmedia. I know you have tons of followers and fans. Tell us about the move to True North.
Well, it was a great privilege to work at Postmedia for about 12 years, appearing in papers all across the country. I think it's no secret that media is going through a bit of an existential challenge right now, regardless of what the media outlet is, traditional media outlets, that is, dealing with the business model, dealing with different audience engagement models. And I was just really interested to pursue the opportunity to go towards an online-only new startup, although True North has now been around for about 5 years and is growing every month, growing every year. So not so much of a startup anymore, but being able to just take a different approach, I think, to news gathering in Canada, because to your point, there's a lot of options out there now for Canadian news consumers, for news consumers all around the world, and we're just one of a number of different groups trying a different direction now.
So, Anthony, let's reflect back on 2022. In your opinion, what was the top news story for 2022 as it pertains to the economy?
Wow. Well, depending on what part of the world you're in, I think for Canadians, for Americans, it was going through that final series of lockdowns. Believe it or not, there was a lockdown in January 2022 in Ontario. America didn't go through that, but they did go through some of the fallout and ramifications of those very heavy-handed COVID-19 rules, things working themselves through the supply chain. And I think a government commitment to say, we're not going to do that again. Here's what we're going to do to ease all of that, because of course the ramifications have included all this inflation that's spiraling out of control. And I hear from business leaders, you hear from many business leaders who are still talking about all the things that are happening in this new economy, really, that really was kicked in this direction because of the pandemic response.
Yeah, we've all seen the challenges for specifically small to medium-sized business in the last couple of years, especially when they were shut out of the economy for so long while the big multinationals continued to operate. So I think that's a great top news story. What would be your second runner-up in terms of news stories on the economy?
Well, on a very related note, when it comes to inflation, I think it's what we see with these interest rates going up so high, so quickly. We had the Bank of Canada governor previously saying not too long ago, oh, don't worry, there's not going to be inflation. There's nothing to see here, folks. And then all of a sudden, almost a whiplash moment. It's like watching a tennis game to figure out what the central bankers are actually thinking they're going to do, instead of easing us into more moderate interest rate hikes, which I don't think nobody doubts that we needed to get away from our addiction to cheap debt. But we've done it in this incredible system shock way where it clearly was not well thought out, not well planned by the Bank of Canada. And they're still not exactly sure where they're going to head with this. And I really worry for regular consumers, homeowners, average folks who've been caught up in this maelstrom.
Yeah, just went to the grocery store and almost had a heart attack when I saw my bill. So let's focus on 2023. We only have about a minute left before we have to go to break. What do you see as happening in 2023 in the economy?
Hopefully, we see stability. But the concern, my understanding, is that a lot of economists talk about how many months, how many quarters it takes for the real ramifications of interest rate hikes to be felt. And I'm very nervous about those stories about decent, hardworking, middle class Canadians losing their homes once they hit that trigger rate for their mortgages. And there's going to be some of them. I hope it's not many, but there's going to be some. And I'm nervous about that. And I think all Canadians should be.
Absolutely. We're going to go to break. We'll be back on the other side. You're watching Canadian Innovators. Don't go away. Welcome back. I'm speaking with journalist and author Anthony Furey, Vice President of True North Media. Anthony, let's talk about Bill C-11. For those who don't know it, can you talk about the bill? This is the federal government's third attempt to pass this internet censorship bill. Tell us about the bill and what's behind it.
Yeah, the bill has been dubbed Justin Trudeau's online censorship bill. What it is purposely for, what the Liberal government says it's for, is to modernize the Broadcasting Act because things are very different in the broadcasting realm than they were 20, 30 years ago. So they want to acknowledge the various online options like streaming services in the way that the CRTC, the regulatory body that manages the whole broadcasting realm, engages with this. And there's no doubt that there needs to be some degree of modernization. Where the concern comes in, Jocelyn, is that they want to do things like compel different broadcasters, streaming services, online portals to engage with content in different ways. For instance, create algorithms that promote some content over others. Now, they say this is in the name of just promoting Canadian culture. For starters, people are asking, well, is it the government's job to promote Canadian homegrown television over American homegrown in terms of how the algorithm works? And secondly, well, what if you actually do something else with these algorithms? What if you say, oh, this thing that's criticizing the government, you got to downplay that a bit, YouTube? So YouTube and other organizations are actually running big ad campaigns right now. It's all over Union Station, downtown Toronto, saying, watch out, government, get your hands off people's content.
Yeah, and we've seen with the Twitter files, the shenanigans that were going on behind the scenes to suppress some content and to bring up some other content. And we really don't need any more censorship in our lives. We wanted to hear both sides of the story. So what impact will this bill have on True North?
Well, the impact on True North, that's an interesting question. I mean, we are a content creator and our video content primarily is going up onto modules like YouTube. So if the government is setting rules for the degree to which algorithms allow people to more readily see the content, the way it's promoted, pushed, appears in the recommended bars, that could negatively affect True North. It can negatively affect any Canadian news organization. It can also negatively affect any Canadian content creator. We've also seen reports that indicate that the content creator economy, because there are a lot of people who either as a side hustle or as their full-time job do create content, user-generated content for places like YouTube and for TikTok. If they feel the rules are too restrictive and they're making a living and they're paying taxes doing this stuff, they're even employing assistants, they're going to hop south of the border, they're going to the United States. So we could actually lose Canadian jobs because of this bill.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've already seen small to medium-sized business moving for other reasons south. We need all the jobs we have right here in Canada. Anthony, as you reflect on the Canadian economy, what do you see as the biggest threat to the economic prosperity that we have here in Canada?
Well, to her point about Bill C-11, government getting way too involved in micromanaging people's choices, I think there are a number of fronts right now where government, the federal government, but other levels of government as well, are really under the misconception that their role is not to facilitate business succeeding by getting out of the way, but to micromanage and tell different industries, this is exactly what you must do, when you must do it, sales targets for electric vehicles, for instance, rather than letting consumers have their choice. And I think that's playing a dangerous game. That's not traditionally how a thriving economy works.
So, Anthony, how could it be different? What would you do if you were in charge of this internet and the rules and regulations about independent media?
Well, when it comes to the internet regulations, it's been described as a multi-pronged assault on the online realm because there's several pieces of legislation the Liberal government has put forward when it comes to internet issues. I think the main thing is to just step back and only regulate things if they're already breaking Canadian law. And I think there are some things going on in the internet that are criminal conduct that are not being adequately probed by the RCMP. And if we want to talk about creating tools for all of that, awful things like child exploitation happen in online forums regularly. We certainly need to crack down on that. But things that are not actually illegal, like algorithms of which content is promoted and what isn't, I don't think the government needs to force that stuff around.
Absolutely. More freedom through more choices, let people see different views and make their own decisions on what is the truth based on what knowledge they have. So we're going to go to break. We'll be right back. You're watching Canadian Innovators. I'm talking to Anthony Furey right here on the News Forum Network. Don't go away. Anthony, I'm sure the move to independent media is not without risk. What keeps you up at night?
What keeps me up at night? Well, Jocelyn, I think you might be alluding to the fact that I know you wanted to discuss a book I wrote the other year called Pulse Attack, the real story about the secret weapon that can destroy North America. It's a national security book that took a look at how we are increasingly a fragile electronic civilization, meaning we have all these great technologies, these great electronics that we both love for personal use, but they're also empowering our society. And it seems all very advanced, and it is, but all you need to do is shut off the power, and all of that falls apart. And not just our ability to enjoy our streaming services, but our ability to keep our hospitals functioning, our ability to manage our regional food hubs. And in the book, I explore various different ways that bad actors could take down the electrical grid, whether it's through specific attacks on transformer stations or electromagnetic pulse warfare, which I think I was a little ahead of the curve when I first wrote about it, because there was not a lot known about the separating the fact from fiction of it, but more and more places and electrical agencies are doing formal studies of it, because you only really need one bad actor to detonate such a device that could actually take down a large part of the electricity grid for a long period of time.
So, Anthony, just this past few weeks, we saw that the commercial airline industry came to a grinding halt because both in Canada and the United States because of system failure. Do you see this being a part of this pulse attack situation, or is that just an isolated event?
Well, any sort of cyber attack or any sort of systems failure that has to do with our electricity grid is all related. Whether or not it's a bad guy out there, a James Bond style villain looking to totally take down the grid, or whether it's an accident like the major power outage we had in the Eastern Seaboard in Toronto, New York, Buffalo, cities that saw the electricity go down for like 3 or 4 days, ultimately because some trees weren't properly trimmed along a rural street in the United States, and the trees knocked down one power line, and there's a cascading failure. So a lot of people are investigating ways to further enhance grid resilience. So whether it's an electromagnetic pulse detonation up in the sky or a couple of trees in rural New Hampshire, neither of those episodes have the ability to take down the grid. I wrote in my book about how because of those trees causing that, babies who were in the NICU in Toronto, nurses had to use hand pumps to keep their breath going, their pulses going. I mean, really wild triage stuff.
So, what can we do to prevent this type of attack? What infrastructure do we need?
Well, we need to upgrade our current infrastructure when the life cycle renews to introduce different parts that engineers on the cutting edge of this issue have determined are much more resilient to act as surge protectors if there ever is an attack from a villain, or if there's any sort of accident. So in my research, I found that the grid going down could end up with so many people tragically dying because of lack of access to goods they need, because the grid could stay down for many weeks, many months, depending on the number of transformer stations that are harmed, and of course, trillions of economic damage. But the actual costs to renew some of the key parts to these products that we rely upon aren't actually that high. So it's really just talking about it more and for industry to write their reports on what needs to happen and how they replace those parts. And it's not actually that complicated, is my sense, but I've been glad to see that since I wrote the book, different industry associations have been probing the matter further.
So, give me a prediction. Do you think that we could see here in North America a pulse type attack in the next 1 to 2 years?
Oh, geez, I hope not, Jocelyn. And another way that this can come about is actually a solar flare. A solar flare replicates a pulse attack, or should I say, an electromagnetic pulse attack replicates what a solar flare does. And in 1859, there's something called the Carrington event, where all the electronics on Earth were actually damaged because of a massive solar flare caused by the sun. The only saving grace was, well, 1859, there were hardly any electronics around then. So it was just very basic telegraph machines that caught fire. I hope something won't happen 2 years from now, but black swan events are called that because you never know when they're going to descend. They could happen at any point, and we don't protect against them because the odds of them happening are so minimal. But if they do happen, it's so devastating that afterwards you say, why didn't we do anything to protect ourselves?
So, talk about the time frame. How quickly could we implement something that would prevent this type of attack here in Canada?
Well, my understanding is it can happen pretty quickly. Like I said, it's about replacing different parts and different transformer stations. And I can't tell you exactly what part and what station because the whole point of the conversation is the industry is trying to figure all that out as well, how they can make themselves much more or much less vulnerable to having any sort of surge hit them.
We're back. Joining me today is Vice President of True North Media, Anthony Furey. Anthony, this is the part of the show that every week I ask my guest, if you were a politician, what 3 things you would do to grow jobs and the economy in Canada. Anthony, you have the floor. What would you do?
All right, the roll call of the 3 things. One of the first things I would do, Jocelyn, is I would really reduce the red tape around environmental assessments in Canada. One thing that's been really interesting to watch in Europe is how they want to wean themselves off of Russian oil and gas. Things have not been as bad as they thought would unfold. And Europe has not had the horrible winter that they anticipated. And one reason, there's a number of reasons, but they've managed to get LNG terminals built lickety split way faster than usual because they've said, these are urgent times. We've got to get rid of red tape and timelines around environmental assessments. We've got to approach our economic growth with the same urgency, and we shouldn't leave things shelved waiting approval for many months. So I would do that. Number 2 is here in Canada, the federal government is increasing the number of carbon taxes we have and the stringency of those carbon taxes. So we're adding a second one, the clean fuel standard, the original carbon tax. They're upping the ante on it every year. And now is just not the time to do that because it's deleterious to both the consumers and to individuals. I get rid of that. And number 3, it would be great to just change the general tone and culture and the way that we talk about the economy and the government and its relation to business. You know, when we talk about electric vehicle sales, and I'm all in support of anybody purchasing whatever vehicle they want, go ahead and buy the electric vehicle. The government's trying to mandate it. They think that they sort of control the levers of the economy rather than more acknowledging that business knows their industry best. And you have to step back and you have to let the experts in those fields do it rather than thinking it's your job to sort of bully certain industries into success or into failure in the case of the oil and gas sector approach. So that attitudinal shift, I think, would be my third biggest change.
I couldn't agree with you more, Anthony. Hopefully, at some point, you're going to get a chance to be a politician because I would be in full support of that. Anthony, you had a fascinating career. Please share with us the most important lesson you've ever learned.
Oh, wow. Well, I think one of the great privileges of being someone who's out front and center in the news, opinion personality, newspaper columnist, particularly when you put your email at the bottom of your column or you put it on your Twitter page, is people write to you. They share their thoughts, they share their insights. And it's really something just how much wisdom and information and intelligence regular folks out there have. And you see at the bottom of their email, it has their little bio line about where they're working right now or their life story. And whether it's a person who's the EVP of a bank or someone who's been working as a mechanic for 30 years, you kind of take their wisdom and you go, wow, this is really cool. And it's kind of a privilege to be a person who can in a way, be like a central clearinghouse for public opinion and what people are thinking. They just send you all this stuff, and it is very humbling because there's just so many great people out there in this country, Jocelyn.
Yes, that we do have a wonderful country with a bunch of entrepreneurs and people that have a great heart. So let's talk about what your hope is for 2023.
Well, gee, speaking about regular folks, I mean, my hope is that these potential negatives that we've talked about, people losing their homes, people who are finding it increasingly difficult to make ends meet, that things do better for them. The federal Liberal government has indicated that they're going to bring in supports and cash transfers. And look, I support doing whatever we can to help people in dire time of need, but I'm not sure if more government program spending is the answer. We got a lot of reports that the pandemic spending was not actually spent efficiently. More, I hope that we can see a lot of choices that bring about shared prosperity. People who are high net worth individuals, I think in these downturns, they actually know there's a lot of buying opportunities out there, and there's ways that they can continue to build personal wealth. But if you're someone on the lower income ladder, you don't have that money to put into this stock that's a bargain basement price. So I'm really got my fingers crossed optimistically for regular folks right now.
So, last question, and we just got about 30 seconds. How do we bring back middle class jobs and manufacturing to Canada?
Wow, I think you're really well positioned to answer that question better than I am, Jocelyn. But as I said about that attitudinal shift, just really remembering that government doesn't know best. That, as I said, I hear from people from all industries, all walks of life, and I think we really have to empower their knowledge and let them lead us front and center, not somebody up in an ivory tower.
Well, Anthony, thank you for taking the time to join us today. Such a fascinating discussion. But that's all the time we have for today, and I'm sure we'll have you back again. Thanks, Anthony.
Thanks for having me.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to my guest, Anthony Furey of True North Media. I'm Jocelyn Bamford. Thank you for watching Canadian Innovators. If you're an innovator, tell us your story. Write to us at Canadian Innovators at thenewsforum.ca, and we'll see you next time.